By 2032, ACT will empower 20.2 million more learners to exit high school ready for post-secondary and work opportunities. We will concentrate our work around 5 strategic pillars: build, inform, connect, mobilize, and partner. We are collaborating with key stakeholders to bring this bold new vision to life. We've got our work cut out for us, and with your support moving forward, we will make it happen.
All right, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session 2 of the Iowa Ideas Conference. I'm Caleb McCullough. I'm your moderator for this session, and we're going to be talking today about meeting the needs of students at the college level, and it's within the track of higher education. So we'll be talking here with our 3 great panelists today, and also we'll be addressing all of your questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave those in the chat. And our sessions all have closed captioning access. So if that is needed for you, you can access that. So I want to welcome our great panelists, Sarah Hansen, the Vice President of Student Life at the University of Iowa, Colette Atkins, the Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs at Kirkwood, and Brandon Slade. He is the founder of Untapped Learning. And so this session, we are in the higher education track that is sponsored by ACT. So I want to thank our sponsor ACT and our presenting sponsor ITC Midwest. So yeah, I think we're ready to jump into the session here. I'm excited to have you all here, and I'm really excited to hear from our panelists. So I think I want just each of you to start off by introducing yourself, what areas of student life you work in, and kind of how you see your relation to this question of how we meet student needs. So Sarah, why don't you start?
Sure. Happy to be here, and thanks to everyone who's joining us. I am the Vice President for Student Life at the University of Iowa, and although that term can be used pretty broadly, at the University of Iowa, that means essentially all of the support services and co-curricular learning experiences that we provide to students to help them develop as humans, as leaders, and to learn to interact successfully through college. So it includes everything from student organizations to residence halls to all of the mental health and well-being services that we offer.
Brandon?
Yeah, I'm Brandon Slade. I'm the founder and CEO of Untapped Learning, and my focus is executive function skills. So it's essentially time management, organization, paying attention, getting started. The core populations that struggle with this are students with ADHD, dyslexia, high levels of anxiety, and so work with students across the country. We're at about 40 different universities right now. We also work with professors, and we help launch these students into their careers. So that's my focus.
Colette?
Good morning. Well, glad to have everybody here. Colette Atkins, work at Kirkwood, and my role is really to support all of the things that happen inside the classroom. So Sarah's got outside and I've got inside the classroom. So all of our faculty and deans and the good teaching and learning that happens inside the classroom.
All right. It's a lot of great perspectives here. So yeah, so our topic today, of course, is meeting the needs of students. Very broad topic. We got a lot of areas we could cover. So I just want to kind of leave this really open-ended, and any of you can get started here. What is the situation that we're seeing with student needs today? What are some of the biggest issues that are facing students, and how are colleges responding to that?
I'm happy to go ahead and get us started. I know that we've had some conversation about this, so it'll be interesting to hear from Sarah and Brandon, but certainly one of the things that's top of mind, 2 things, I'll start with 2 things, is this gap in learning that we are experiencing from the pandemic. So our students coming out of the K-12 system, there's just been a lot of loss of learning. And so we on the college side are really having to readjust the way in which we're engaging our students, both inside and outside the classroom, and being, making sure that we are actually student ready as opposed to expecting the students to be college ready. Along those lines is this mental health piece, and just the increase, I think, spotlight on all of the stuff, right? These invisible backpacks that these students have that are just filled with stuff that they're bringing with them to college as well, and trying to sort of pull those, unpack those things so they can be successful inside the classroom.
And I think, Colette, in addition to that, kind of broadly thinking of that mental health and well-being, we've talked about kind of the increase in just helping students meet their basic needs. So issues like food insecurity, financial challenges. We know that higher education is expensive, but the percentage of our students who are needing extra assistance around finances or around food or housing, we're definitely seeing an increase in that as well, and definitely an increased demand for mental health services. So I think one of the burdens or the responsibilities for higher ed right now is to really evolve our model around mental health service provision. We can't necessarily staff our way out of this and think that we can just keep hiring individual level therapists as the only and default type of support for mental health. We have to think differently about kind of creating a constellation of care for students and a variety of options for them to get help when they need it.
Two great perspectives, and I love that you guys jump in really quickly to take the pressure off. But so I mean, it's always been such a hard transition from this very structured home environment to the unstructured of a college or university. And the population we work with tends to struggle with that even more, going from unstructured to structured. But it seems like everybody's struggling with that now. From my perspective, we lost several years of problem-solving skills with these students when they just stayed in the house and there wasn't a whole lot of problems to solve. And when they get on a college campus and we have just day-to-day issues, they tend to melt down. So, there's a lack of development there, but also the academic resiliency we've seen is much lower as well. So students aren't as willing to engage in hard problems like they used to be.
And Sarah, you mentioned the problem of staffing when it comes to mental health, that the mental health needs of students, there's just no way to have the people on staff to address that. So what are some of the solutions to kind of get around that in creative ways?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is really thinking about, like I said, evolving our model. Our traditional model of mental health has been everyone who has a concern starts at the top of this huge funnel, and at the bottom of the funnel is an individual appointment with a counselor. And for some of our students, that's exactly what they need. But for some, there's things along the way down that funnel that we could provide on, even the prevention of teaching how to deal with stress and distress. The things that Brandon does around study skills and executive functioning, problem solving. But we've done things like add staff in our student care and assistance area. And those folks are really more like navigators. They help students through difficulty, access the resources that they want. It's not individual level therapy, but it's a lot of problem solving and support. We've also added a 24/7, 365 phone, text, and chat crisis line for our students that allows them to interact in whenever they need, not just necessarily in traditional office hours. And I think that sort of set of different options for students is really going to be vital. We still are going to always need individual level therapy for some students or group therapy for some students, but we have to, I think, continue to diversify the help options available.
Yeah, and Colette, when it comes to student performance in the classroom and mental health, how do we see mental health, the effects of that on academic performance?
We see it in a variety of ways, right? Our faculty are being asked to do more things than what they've ever been asked to do. So, it's students not coming to class. You've got students that have been doing well and all of a sudden they disappear. Assignments aren't being turned in. There's no response, right? They were communicating and suddenly nobody's responding to anything. So I think those are certainly some quick ways in which we see students really struggling with their mental health. We're working really hard in the classroom to create a sense of belonging. That's one way in which the classroom environment can start to tackle this mental health challenge as well. And a little bit about what Brandon was talking about and helping all of our students feel a sense of belonging in that space. Lots of students come to a college campus and they just don't feel like they should be a part of that. So our faculty are working really hard to do a couple of things to create that sense of belonging for our students, which is a multi-pronged approach. And secondly, really personalizing that learning experience, because we're finding that That's really what our students are demanding. In addition, we're preparing our students to go out into the world of work, right? And so our workforce is really looking for our students to have some type of personalized experience. So when they get out, they're ready to start work on day one. So those are a couple of ways in which we're seeing it in the classroom, and the ways in which our faculty, who are typically, right, the ones that are working directly with our students on a day-to-day basis, they have the most contact with our students. And we're asking them more than ever to do more than just offer that technical training or that technical education, but really that support system and that sense of belonging on the college campus.
Yeah. So we know that mental health concerns are increasing for college students, as you've all said. What are some of the root causes of that? Has that been, identified? Why is this growing at this time?
I can start us. First of all, I don't think anyone has the true answer to that, but I think, one thing that's probably important to acknowledge is it's a distressing world. So it's a perfectly normal and expected response for folks to be challenged by what's happening in the world these days. I think we'd be more concerned if folks were not responding with some distress with all the challenges that we have societally and internationally. I think obviously the conversation has continued to raise the profile and help this generation of students, probably more than any other, feel comfortable noting when they are being challenged and when they need help. And that's actually a really good thing. We want students to feel comfortable disclosing that they need help and asking for help. So certainly some destigmatization has occurred and continues to occur. And then this generation of students, many of them have been in therapy before. They've maybe had a diagnosis before coming to college. They've even had ongoing psychiatric care or medication. So they're a pretty experienced generation around mental health concerns too.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. What you said is dead on with them having access to so much information. So when you look into literature, there's so many causes. It's, we're not necessarily designed to know everything that's going on in the world like we are now, and that can be very distressing. And then we could also go into technology and, spiking dopamine levels, and what goes up must come down. Or we could go into parenting and how, we don't let our kids fail as much as we have traditionally in the past. And so when they do fail, it almost hits twice as hard. So there's a lot of different rabbit holes we could go down here. But at the end of the day, these two spoke to, and I agree with completely, this generation just kind of built different, and the need to be seen by their professors is very different than what we've seen in the past.
And Brandon, now that we're on the topic of mental health still, you specialize in students with ADHD. What kind of have you seen around students with ADHD in the last few years? Is that increasing? Is it becoming more common? What does that look like?
It is such a controversial thing in the industry, and for the purpose here, I don't know if it really matters if they have a diagnosis or not. What really matters here is if they if they struggle paying attention, or they struggle with getting started or completing things, how do we help them build systems, habits, routines in order to be successful? And the key thing here is what's essential for students, who are neurodiverse, is best practice for everybody regardless. So if we can help teach these things, before they step foot on campus or when they're on campus, it's going to be best practice for everybody, but it's just essential for us that struggle with an ADHD.
Yeah. And so please go ahead, Sarah.
That's all right. I was just gonna elevate a comment that Brandon had made, and this idea that it's best practice for everyone, right? That's really the space that we're in, is how do we offer these experiences that are different than what we've ever offered before, and elevate all of our students. We know that helps a certain group of students, but what I love about what Brandon is saying is it helps all of our students. So why isn't it just something that's available to all of our students? And that's what we continue to think about and work on. I think at the college level, as well as, how do we just make these support services unavoidable? And it's just part of their experience at college, right? I mean, in the past, the experience was, well, everybody goes to class, well, how about everybody goes to class and has supplemental learning? How about everybody goes to class and they have these resources that Brandon's group has put together? It just makes best sense. So I just really appreciate that comment, Brandon. And I know that's something that we continue to work on in the space that Sarah and I are in, and how do we just make it sort of accessible for everyone?
Yeah, no, I don't know how you guys do it with the scale you guys have. So thank you for the work you do. But also just a quick note on this, Caleb, is back when I was in college and before, we really attacked as students the working memory. So it's like I give you facts and you regurgitate those facts to me. And then we got in the real world. We were looking for employees who could do repeatable tasks at a high level. Well, everything's getting automated now. We're not looking for that. So like a common task that we give, our recent college graduates, or we see, other businesses give them tasks like increase our website traffic by 10%. And the kids just kind of like look at us with like their head cocked. It's like, you have this problem and there's no right or wrong answer. But how do we reverse engineer this problem with those executive function skills, go into small manageable steps along the way, and then reorient when things aren't going well? That's a really hard skill that most 20-year-olds haven't been given in years past. And that's what the world needs right now. So I'm not sure if it's an ADHD or we're just attacking skills we've never attacked.
Now, obviously, learning loss through the pandemic has been a big topic, both at the lower education and higher education levels. Today's college students spent a good portion of their high school career, doing some remote learning affected by the pandemic. How is that being seen at the college level when it comes to academics? What are we seeing for student learning loss?
You bet. We're seeing students come, they don't have some of those basic study skills, note-taking skills. They have a hard time understanding academic writing, right? To pick up a textbook and to actually read the textbook and understand what the textbook is saying has been a challenge for some students. Quantitative skills. So there's certainly a long list. I think, though, what I started the session with, and I think is really important to highlight, is we're really looking at how do we make the college we're ready for the students, right? Not the students have to be ready for us. And that is a change in the way in which we do our work, in the way in which we think about our work. So we're not expecting all the students to show up day one knowing how to take good notes, knowing how to read an academic textbook. That's not what we're doing, right? We're looking at each individual student and providing those students the support that they need in order to be successful in that learning environment. So I think it's a real shift in the way in which all of us do our work in colleges and universities.
And I think it's a much needed shift. I know we all agree. Higher education is very slow to change, but I'm really also excited to see some of the things that are happening in the classroom around just what Colette said about embedding some of those help and supplemental learning experiences into the classroom. So for instance, a giant chemistry class at an institution like the University of Iowa, we now have student leaders who have taken the course before and gotten a good grade, who are working hand in hand with the faculty member to do supplemental instruction review sessions after each lecture and help students really do real-time problem solving of those chemistry problems. We also have some peer supports just in terms of things like in our writing classes, so that, again, a student who has more experience and can help teach some of those effective learning practices, effective writing practices, and that peer-to-peer component of learning, I think, is also really valuable. So I've been excited to see, even though, as I said, we are sometimes slow to change, many of our faculty really embracing some of those great pedagogies that we know are really effective, as we've all said, for all students.
Another piece that we've been doing, I think, for quite some time, but doing even better now, is that idea, Brandon talked about this a little bit, this idea of that project-based learning and that problem solving. So not only are we seeing that in our real hands-on programming, right, such as skilled trades, but we're seeing that in many of our liberal arts programming courses as well. This idea that a student is solving a problem while learning that skill set, which becomes much more, the students, it's easy to sort of attack that kind of learning as opposed to the sit and get and the memorization and those types of things. So a lot more project-based learning, hands-on learning, work-based, right, where we're working with our employers or the students are transferring on. So we're seeing a lot more of that in the classroom, which is really, we're getting some nice results from that as well.
One of the reasons I admire what Sarah and Colin are doing so much is because they do have that mindset, like we're going to build this bridge with the student. Just from my experience, that's kind of rare in higher education. We've always expected our kids to, walk on campus and kind of be good to go in some sense. And so what we're noticing is that where the struggle is, we have to break it down into really a minute piece and then role play it with them. So like a common thing is a lot of our students get a high level of anxiety when they have to go talk to their professor. Everyone's saying like, you got to advocate your professor, you got to advocate for extra time or whatever that accommodation is. And first of all, our students don't even know what they're advocating for. They've never had to do it. And just ramps up anxiety. So it's just role playing with them, like how to walk back to a professor or a TA with your shoulders back, head high, look them in the eye and ask for what you need clearly, kindly, and without entitlement. It's just a skill they don't have, but then they get it. So a lot of this just role playing things that spike anxiety and that they just don't know how to do. They get it, but it just takes a little bit extra practice than it has in the past.
And something that I know you all have touched on a little bit here is sometimes the need for personalized approaches to different struggles and issues and needs that students have. So I don't know if you want to talk about, especially when it comes to a school like the University of Iowa with 30,000 students, how can colleges take the approach of, finding personalized solutions at that scale? What does that look like?
Well, I think it's definitely not a one size fits all, but I think one of the things that we are becoming more and more skilled at, back to what Colette said about that sense of belonging, we know that having a student within, the first 6 to 8 weeks, having a sense that I belong at the University of Iowa is so directly and strongly tied to their coming back the following year and eventually graduating successfully. We are doing lots of things where we try to provide segmenting so that students are in smaller cohorts right away, whether that's a living learning community in the residence halls, a first year seminar of 25 or fewer students with a faculty member, even our kind of orientation programs and welcome programs provide lots of opportunities for students to make connections right away and not at a scale of 5,000 students in our incoming class. Even though we are a big institution, I think one of the things that we know that we do well, especially compared to our peers in the Big Ten, is kind of provide that big experience, but with a small town feel, a small feel. I often tell our parents and families that I can guarantee within a couple of weeks of their first year student being on our campus, as they are making their way to class, they are going to see other people that they already know or recognize, and probably a faculty or staff member during the course of the day that knows and recognizes them. And I'm really proud of that fact at such a large institution, because it's not easy to accomplish, but I think we try to do it everywhere all the time in a way that makes it unavoidable, as Colette said.
It's really a multi-pronged approach. There's no one size fits all. And, Sarah earlier on said financially, you can't afford to, hire one staff person for one student. It just doesn't make good sense. So it's really, thinking about these different groups of students. How do we help them create a sense of belonging, rather it be with a faculty member, with their advisor, with a navigator, with a peer, right? Somebody that's been on campus longer. Lots of opportunities to create this sense of belonging for our students as we continue, because we know what the research tells us is, as we've noted, students feel a sense of belonging at that institution. They're more likely to persist through completion, and that's what we're here to do. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that one of the things we're continuing to tackle is this real gap in success when we look at our white students and our students of color. And so this is a place where we really can start to make some inroads in that, I think, is creating those places where students of color feel that they have their community. Or students, right, as Brandon has talked about, students that might have a ADHD or something, right? And helping those students see themselves at college on the campus really assists in continuing to decrease that gap in our white students who are persisting at a higher rate than our students of color.
Or even our first gen students, supporting kind of all aspects of human difference. I think one of the programs that has been very successful, and it's relatively new at Iowa, is a first gen Hawks program where students can opt into this cohort experience. They have a peer mentor who's also first gen. They have access to some supplemental experiences. They can have a campus job right away with a campus supervisor who's going to mentor and pay attention and connect with them. And the students who participated in that program, the percentage increase in retention over first gen students who've not participated is double digit. So again, all of these things are the right things to do for all students, and trying to scale and make sure that we're providing them for as many students as possible, I think, is all of our goal.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead, Caleb.
No, please go ahead.
Let's say I'm a concrete person, so just a concrete intervention too that we've seen work really well with our students who are at risk, whether they're they are in disability services involved there or first gen or whatever. Is I know when we first get syllabuses, we take syllabuses and we take all the family requirements, appointments. We take all this and we dump it all on a calendar. It's usually easiest on like a Google Calendar or a planner, but finding ways when you get everything out, like you can see which students, we can pick students out. They're like, oh my gosh, in the beginning of November, this student is really a risk of dropping out. You can see different challenges pop up when you get everything out beforehand before you begin. So I know we've tried to do certain interventions to get out in front of things, because you see it on paper, you're like, that's just not manageable.
I think I was just going to note, those concrete solutions are certainly really important to the work that we're doing, because oftentimes, right, we might sort of talk more broadly. And so I appreciate Brandon and folks like Brandon that really come in with those concrete solutions. So that's exactly what we need. So.
And to touch on the needs again of students of color, as you mentioned, Colette, what solutions, approaches, interventions kind of do we see working when it comes to supporting students of color on campus?
So we're doing a couple of things here at Kirkwood that I'll talk about. We're really tackling it from both in the classroom, the curriculum perspective, and just creating basic things such as a welcoming syllabus, right? That I think many of us probably take for granted, but using language that encourages students to talk to their faculty member about concerns, that creates a sense of welcome, an environment of we're here to support your learning, offering different ways in which students can be assessed inside the classroom, and thinking about it from that perspective. We've also got, and we've done that through working with faculty and really taking a critical look at what that inside the classroom looks like. In addition, we've got some folks that are dedicated to our students of color outside the classroom and really very targeted to providing those students some supports that just being intentional. I think that's the word I would use, being really intentional, being very focused, and being personalized at the same time. And we're making some really good traction, and we're seeing that this work is making a difference. And how we're looking and evaluating that is, are the students sticking around to the next semester? Are they completing what they came to Kirkwood to complete? And they are. We still have lots more work to do, but we see the work that we're doing is making a difference. So.
Brendan and Sarah, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that.
I think that sense of community is important. The University of Iowa is a predominantly white institution, and so we have a number of student organizations. Students are the ones who drive our student organizations, so anyone can start a student org. They just have to have 4 or 5 friends, and we have a variety of them. Some of them kind of bizarre in terms of what they decide to do. I think we have a Quidditch club and some other things, but we have cultural centers on our campus that were started by students for students, and they provide a home away from home for our students of color, for our LGBTQ students, and just a place where they feel like they can completely be themselves and interact with other folks who might understand their experience. We're continuing to look at how we ensure that the faculty and staff at the University of Iowa represent, again, the range of human identities and experiences, so that having first-gen faculty and staff identify themselves as such, and that makes them so much more approachable to a student who might identify that way as well. And as Colette said, the changing of the way that we teach and invite students to learn. I think being more in partnership with our students around learning is just a critical part of supporting all of our students, including our students of color.
We've talked a lot about these different solutions that you see as helping to address these issues. So I'm just curious, compared to what is accessible, I guess, by colleges now, what resources do universities and colleges need at this point to reach these goals, to do a better job of meeting these students' needs?
I'll be happy to jump in and get us started. I think we probably have a variety of ways in which we see where we could use some assistance. Certainly as we continue to look for ways in which we can become more efficient in our work while still offering that level of personalization, which seems at opposite ends of the spectrum, but it's not. So I think continuing to find ways to really, from that efficiency perspective. I also would like to highlight that, when we think about how our state and federal government continues to support college, it continues to decline. And so I think there's an opportunity for our legislatures to really take more of a critical look at how they're spending their money and how they're supporting education in general. So I think that's an opportunity. I think lastly, we have an opportunity, we're starting to see this more than ever, which I'm very appreciative of, is this collaboration amongst both private and public colleges, universities, and our industry partners, right? So I think for us to continue to do the work that we're doing, for us to continue to want to do the work that we've talked about a little bit today here, we're going to need all of those things in order to respond to the students that are coming to our college campuses. So I could add 10 more, but I will pass it off to either Sarah or Brandon.
Brandon, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, it's such a hard question to attack because there's so many issues, and now the world's changing so quickly. It almost feels like we're trying to hit a moving target with a lot of these kids and how we prepare them. So I guess just a few basic things. So if you're looking at like a tier 1 intervention, like one intervention that we'd give everybody, I'm big on lead dominoes. So like, what's like one thing we could do that would fix like 5-10 other problems? And a lead domino for me is having instructors. This online thing is very different. And so right now, a lot of our students are having a hard time. Like if there's a research paper, our students are having a hard time finding the syllabus, finding the assignment description, and then the rubric. Like they're scattered. So if we could get on the same page and really focus on organizing our online portals, I know that would save a lot of students we work with like just so much headache. So that's a great tier 1 intervention that we can do right away. How do we give our kids 2 pats on the back, 1 kick in the tail? What does that look like at different places? So providing those supports and that love and that accountability. And then for more of like a tier 2 intervention, it is a lot of what we've seen has worked are those partnerships, whether it's mental health, someone who has more resources bringing them in, whether it's, a different portion. Higher ed traditionally has kind of been like this like gatekeeper trying to keep people out. And I just think that's going to have to switch the resources and the needs.
And I'll just add a couple more. One, I think, is related to the technology piece that folks have mentioned. And I think when we talk about things at scale, one example of technology that I think has been very useful for us at the University of Iowa, and many, if not most schools now have some mechanism to identify very early on a student who might be at risk of leaving or who is struggling. And we have a tool that we've built here and have collaborated with our College of Public Health, and it has a number, hundreds actually, of predictive indicators for student success. And students, all of our new students, transfers and incoming first-year students, take this survey as a part of a course during their first semester. And then students who either don't have that sense of belonging or are struggling academically, because we pull all kinds of information in, get a personalized outreach based on what their specific need is, and have a chance to engage with resources and get connected to the right people to help them address that challenge. Another example, I think, of this partnership piece, especially at the undergraduate level, is really connecting and providing timely and relevant resources to our parents and families. We have parents and families who are more in touch with their undergraduate students than ever before. It's not the old days where I would call on my residence hall phone or pay phone and ask and talk to my parents once a week at tops. They are texting and chatting all day, but we want to make sure that our parents know about the resources that we have, know how to get their student to connect with those resources, and really have a good set of knowledge about ways that they can support their student in being both successful and independent to the degree possible, so that they can do what they came to the institution of higher ed to achieve.
Great. And just a reminder, we've got a little more than 20 minutes left here for our audience. If you got any questions, please submit those for our panelists while we're going through this. And one thing that I think you all touched on a little bit there, but I'd be curious to hear more about, is what can instructors and professors do to help students, meet their needs? I guess as far as the tradition of how college instruction has generally gone, what needs to change?
I'm happy to jump right in. So the things that I think need to change and are changing, I can speak specifically at Kirkwood. There's some really basic things, right? And one, knowing the students' names. Right? Suddenly you feel like you're seen and you're heard. If my teacher knows who I am, that's really important to that sense of belonging. Creating a learning environment that's flexible. And what I mean by that is flexible in the way in which I'm being assessed. So maybe I'm really good at writing a paper, or maybe I'm really good at orally sharing with you what it is that you want to assess. Creating hands-on types of opportunities for students. We know a majority of students learn best when they really are engaging multiple senses at once. Another way is directly correlating why the students are learning what they're learning in the classroom. For a long time, we've really leaned in on this idea that students just know, right? You know why you're taking this particular course. They don't, nor should they. So help them understand why it is that they're learning what they're learning, and how is that connected to what they're hoping to do one day out in the world of work. Another one, so that's multiple, I think. Another thing to talk about is when we think about that sense of personalization, is allowing students to find the best way in which they learn. Some really need to be in the classroom for every single moment of that instruction. Others really need this more hybrid approach, right? I need to be in the classroom for this piece, but I really want to be able to take the time to do the learning that I can outside the classroom. So how do we balance those as well? And I think it was Sarah that said this earlier, but really this continued shift to where the faculty and the students are all one and the same. It's not that the faculty member is the person that has all of the information and the student has to come to that faculty member to get all of that information. I mean, you can Google about anything at this point in time, whether it's accurate or not, but that's what our students are doing. And so how do we continue to shift that relationship between our faculty and our students to really have them see each other as peers in this environment, which creates, once again, the sense of belonging, brings down some of those, I think, that sort of power dynamic that gets in the way of learning at times. So those are some real things that are happening. And we'll continue to really work on that idea of creating the sense of belonging, personalization, approachability, and not make assumptions that when students walk on a college campus, they know what they should be doing, because they don't. And that's not fair to expect that of our students when they walk onto a college campus.
Even something as simple as defining our terms. I was talking to a group of first-year students who had heard the term that we throw around so much in higher ed of office hours. And they're like, oh, are we supposed to? I thought that was when the faculty member worked on their research and stuff. So I'm not supposed to bother them during office hours. It's like, no, that's actually, they're open. That's drop-in hours. Think of it that way instead. And so thinking about how we sort of use a lot of acronyms and jargon in higher ed, and how can we really break that down to be as clear as possible for as many students as possible.
We get the sort of business practices out of the way for students to actually do the learning when they're on a college campus. I think that's, one of the things that Sarah was highlighting a little bit, and Brandon, as he talks about his work, is, how do we get that stuff out of the way so then the students actually can do the learning that they're on the campus to do? So we've got continued work in that area when we think about the experience a student has when they come to college.
Yeah, Sarah, that was a great example. So like the famous coach John Wooden, he would say, like, when young people mess up, 80% of the time it's incompetence and 20% it's disobedience. So they don't go to office hours because they don't know what office hours is, or they don't come talk to us because they don't know what to talk about. 20% we can handle. It's how do we knock out this 80% up front? And then I'm basically just going to say everything Colette said, because that was perfectly said, and just rephrase it here. But for whatever reason, this generation needs a purpose for everything, and that can be exhausting, but also when you give them a purpose, they thrive. So giving them a purpose for that assignment, self-assessment and learning how they learn is really going to be the key future. The world is going to change so quickly. So if they understand how they learn, and they can learn quickly in that methodology, like this generation is going to do phenomenal things. And then going back to that, just incompetence versus disobedience thing, it's a lot of our faculty, if they notice consistent challenges, how do we give them permission and coach them in a sense to, hyperlink scripts? Like, here's how you email me. Hyperlink that into your syllabus so the students click a button and they know how to email the professor. Hyperlink a script on how to talk to me. Hyperlink, what questions to ask yourself after you did well on an exam, so you can start to learn how you acquire information. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit here, things that we can do that can make a big change pretty quick on that 80%.
And when it comes to college affordability, obviously another big issue. Colleges are getting more expensive. Student loans are a big issue. How does that affect a student's ability to learn and thrive at college, and what can administrators or anybody at the university do to address that?
Well, go ahead, Colette.
I was going to say, community college is always a great option because we are very affordable. And that's certainly one of the tenets of a community college, is providing access to students. And I think, so there's that, obviously. We're also doing quite a bit of work with our students in high school. So they have access to complete college at no cost while they're in high school. So that's sort of this dual, completing their graduation requirements and at the same time completing some college level requirements. I think there's continued opportunity, and we're starting to see more of this as students are gaining these skills outside the traditional college space. And so we need to really continue to work on acknowledging that and giving students credit for that, which will help with that cost of an overall college education. I think, one of the challenges that we're trying to figure out, I don't know that anybody has a solution yet. Maybe my peers today do, but one of the things is I think you've heard from us today, is there's this increased demand and need for support of our students when they come to campus, and this concern about the cost of a college education. So how do we continue to grow that level of support for students, which they need to be successful, yet acknowledge that the cost of a college education really continues to keep a group of students out of this experience. So I don't have the answer to that. I don't really know that anybody does, but the affordability piece is certainly, community college is a great option. We're very affordable, and continuing to work closely with our high school partners in helping students get access to some of that college level learning before they even step on a college campus. In the state of Iowa, we're very fortunate on how that funding model works and how students are not paying anything to complete those college courses while they're in high school. So those are a couple of things that come to mind.
Those are great examples. And I can certainly say it's not at all unusual for me to talk to first-year students at the University of Iowa if they're Iowa residents who have taken multiple community college, particularly in our region, Kirkwood, classes while they were in high school and are coming in with really solid credits to kind of cut the time of their education. Colette mentioned the disinvestment, I think, in higher education at the governmental level. That's real. And it means that we have to depend much more on donors and other folks who, other aspects of philanthropy in order to fund some of these support services that we know students need. There isn't an easy answer, but, certainly more Pell Grants for our lowest income students would be incredible. It opens a door in really important ways, I think, to social mobility. The more students who can access higher education and complete a degree, we all benefit. So really viewing that as an investment versus an expenditure, I think, is one of the frames of mind that I would love to have us shift in the US.
I could not be less qualified to answer this question because this is not my world in any way, shape, or form. But I just know, so the latest research I've seen is, the typical kid with ADHD or some kind of learning challenge gets through college in like 5.5 years. So there's like failed courses along the way, which really increases the cost overall of college. So a lot of the stuff we've talked about today, trying to help our kids, support our kids, and give them the skills to get through in 4.5 years. I think that's going to go a long way for families too on affordability.
And we've been going through today a lot of problems and offering some great solutions, but I'm curious if you've seen anything in the past, and I don't have to give a certain number, but over the years, in recent years, where have things been improving when it comes to student needs, when it comes to how students fare or get their needs met at the college level?
Well, I think we've all been in higher ed focusing on improving student outcomes through the processes and supports that we provide. So, the percentage of students who are graduating, the percentage of students who are coming back after their first year to their second year. There's lots of great improvement in that. And even though we talked about things like, food insecurity and some of those challenges, most of our students at the University of Iowa, nearly 3/4, have enough food to meet their needs. That leaves us a percentage that we obviously need to help address. But it's not all doom and gloom. Over half of the students that graduate from Iowa graduate with zero debt. So it's not everything, but we do need to address those challenges because they are real and we don't want to ignore them. I think there's a lot of great news around student leadership and our student activism. We have a group of students in college today who want to change the world and who are really committed to a world where everyone can feel included and supported. And that, again, that benefits all of us. It benefits our society when everyone can access what they need and participate in the conversation. So I'm inspired every day that I get to have conversations with our students. They are tremendous human beings and they are developing skills to be our next leaders and just do some amazing work. We have the second largest dance marathon in the United States, and they've raised these group of students $40 million in the history of Dance Marathon. We're the only dance marathon nationally that has ever endowed a professorship. And these are students who are making these allocations, sitting around the table with the CEO of the University of Iowa Hospitals and Clinics. Talk about a leadership experience. They inspire me every day.
I think, right, the data continues to support a college education and what that does over a lifetime for a student, both financially, but also for their civic engagement in their community. So that continues to stand steady time over time over time. And as Sarah said, we are seeing some nice with the work that we're doing, we're seeing some nice increases in students persisting through completing their education. There's been a real focus on those outcomes, which has been really important. So I think that's a place in which we can celebrate. A couple of other things I think that are really important to highlight is this group of students that we're working with now. They have come to these college campuses and they are resilient, and I think more resilient than ever. And that's a really big deal. And so I think that we will continue to see that sense of resiliency bleed through the work that we're doing. And this idea of inclusivity, this group more than ever is really thinking about how do I think about the work that I'm doing from an inclusivity lens? And that's how we're going to make some real change through the work that these students are doing, both at the college level, which Sarah gave some really great examples. And this idea that colleges are student ready, that has come from our students. They have forced us to rethink about our work, which is really good. And I'm very appreciative for that. So I think that, that's been on the shoulders of students for probably several decades. And we in higher ed have finally heard them. And we are really adjusting how we're doing our work to make sure that we aren't expecting them to be ready for us, but we're ready for them. That's a pretty big change.
Absolutely. And tying into what both Sarah and Colette said, it's when you give this generation a purpose, I'm amazed at what they can do. Sometimes it can be so frustrating. I'm like, can you please just read the chapter of their book? And they won't do it if they don't see the purpose to it. But they'll do stuff like the dance marathon with CEOs, and like they'll do some incredible stuff. So I'm always amazed by them. And I've noticed in the past few years, it has been that shift with staff at universities and colleges and community colleges where they've recognized the challenge, and there's a lot of people doing very hard and very inspiring work. And I think that's super cool. So it's hard because you're always asked about the challenges, but there's so many good things going on. And if you ever get the chance to walk through campus, you see so many of those.
Now we've talked, a lot about solutions that can happen at the administrator level, at the instructor level, but I'm just curious if you guys have any thoughts on, what everyday Iowans can do when it comes to meeting student needs, whether that's a parent of a student or just somebody in the community who cares about this. What are some of those things?
I would say definitely talk to your elected officials about the value and the core good that higher education provides to our society. I think we have to continue to do a more effective job probably in higher education of communicating that value and translating that value into real life examples of the fact that students learn meaningful skills in higher education that translate into, as Colette said, them being great citizens and community members and neighbors and leaders. But the more I think that Iowans can share how much we have traditionally and continue to value education, K through higher ed in this state, I think that's a real positive thing. And I know that our institutions of higher ed appreciate having that support. It means a lot.
Would certainly like to echo that, and continuing to share that with our elected officials is really important, and get involved. Every one of the college campuses in Iowa rather, has a place for our community members to be involved. So if you're interested to really get more connected to what's happening in the colleges, reach out. There really are lots of opportunities. And so I think that's another way too. Sometimes boots on the ground and having those personal experiences provides you the opportunity to really then be able to go out and celebrate and talk about the good work that's happening. So.
And on that, oh, sorry, please go ahead, Brandon.
Oh, no, I was just saying the same thing. And just from a parenting perspective, leading up to college, working on these college readiness skills, and also letting our kids fail, because getting through college is challenging. And they're going to need those skills of learning how to absorb bump in the roads and work through hard things without us jumping in so they can be successful at the next level.
So we've got a few minutes left here. I'll just do a last call. If you have any questions in the audience, please, get those in. But, for our panelists here, just want to, maybe if you have a few minutes, with all the things we've talked about today, you can kind of distill what you think some of the biggest needs, biggest solutions, what kind of you want the audience to take away here. What would that be, please?
I can go super quick. Just I guess the core of it comes down to that incompetence versus disobedience thing that we talked about. Like if we feel like a student's struggling in something, especially if we see a pattern among multiple students, how can we break that down and teach that skill to them? Because they probably just don't have it and they want to learn it. That's kind of the core of everything that we talk about.
I would just echo, I think, something that we all three have said, and it really focuses even just on what Brandon just said, which is a rising tide lifts all boats, right? The more that we can do the right thing for more students more of the time, everyone benefits, including society. And I know that that's what we're all focused on, is how do we design and implement both courses and programs that support all students and invite all students in. We know that that inclusive type of practice just benefits everyone and is a better experience for the service provider, the instructor, because it's built to include everyone from the beginning.
I'll round us out. That was very well said, Brandon and Sarah. I think from a very practical perspective is for all of us who either are working in higher ed or we have children or neighbors or somebody that's going to engage in that higher ed space, to really think about it from a perspective of helping. And when a question is asked, oftentimes the person doesn't even know what question to ask, and to be patient and to help navigate the processes and procedures that we've established, right or wrong, in the higher ed space. I think just being patient and compassionate, and really trying to come from a place of helping folks when they ask a question and removing those barriers. One of the guiding things that I think about all the time as a first-gen college student myself is, when I went to college, would have I ever been able to figure that out if I didn't have this person that was really kind and helped me figure it out? Or what if it's my kid that's at the University of Iowa and they're struggling? I really want Sarah to be really helpful and kind to my son. So when that child comes to me here at Kirkwood, I think about them as my children, right? So how can I remove the barriers so then they can have all the joy and successes that the three of us have had in that area of probably social mobility and just a sense of being a part of a bigger community?
We do have a comment from the chat, says the humanistic approach across participants and resources seems to be a high priority for the future. Looking at that human level when it comes to the students. I don't know if y'all had any responses to that or comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, student success, and we've talked about retention. Retention is a relational enterprise. Students are retained if they have developed a relationship with faculty and staff on that campus, with other students, and with the institution as a whole. So this is ultimately humanistic relationship work, which is probably why all three of us are in it, because we know that relationships really matter for everyone's success, but they most certainly matter for college student success.
I agree completely. And one thing I don't think we talk about a lot too with that relationship is there's a lot of time with that relationship, because sometimes take that as we have to be softer on this generation, but I can hold kids accountable more if I have that relationship, right? So And I need to say, like, you need to get your tail into office hours. And like, if we need to like put our nose to the grindstone, if I have that relationship, I can do that. So there's another side to that as well, which is really important.
Absolutely. All right, well, I think that we are getting to the end of our session here. And so I just want to thank our participants again, Sarah Hansen, Brandon Slade, and Colette Atkins. Thank you so much for your time and your great insight. Just want to remind the audience that we have a lot of great sessions remaining today and tomorrow. So please, go into the Iowa Ideas on Whova, find the sessions you're interested in, link up with other audience members that you share a passion, you share a audience with, and yeah, thank you for your time and thank you for coming to the session. I appreciate it.